This is number seven podcast.
Number 7 podcast.
Welcome to Number 7 Podcast Channel. We have a pretty special episode lined up for you today. We're celebrating the birthday of former President of Egypt, Anwar el-Sadat. To mark the occasion, we're going to be doing a deep dive into his life, told in his own words through his autobiography, In Search of Identity, which chronicles his life alongside Egyptian history from 1918 onward. So let's start, like Sadat did, in the village of Mit Abul Kum, right there on the banks of the Nile. Sadat really emphasizes those simple joys he experienced growing up. He talks about indulging in treacle mixed with curdled milk, and the excitement of helping his mother fetch carrots straight from the earth, even roasting an onion in the family oven while the bread baked. These early experiences really instilled in him a deep appreciation for nature, a connection that stayed with him throughout his life. But things changed pretty drastically when Sadat moved to Cairo. He went to live with his brother. The family faced quite a bit of financial hardship, and it got even more complicated when his brother, Talat, ran off with the school fees. Just imagine that, a young Sadat carrying his father's whole monthly salary. To school, only to have his hopes dashed. It really shows his early exposure to responsibility and resilience. And despite these setbacks, Sadat eventually earned his General Certificate of Education, which paved the way for his future. And speaking of formative experiences, let's not forget his first time at the cinema. He vividly describes running out of the theater, terrified as a train on the screen seemed to be barreling towards him. It's just a really charming anecdote. It reveals a side of Sadat that, we might not expect. Reminds us that even presidents have their funny moments. So these, seemingly ordinary moments really shaped the man who would lead Egypt through some of its most turbulent times. And it's in these stories, told with honesty and humility, that we start to see the foundations of a leader, one who never forgot his roots. As Sadat got older, he became more and more aware of the world beyond his village. Stories of figures like Kemal Ataturk and Gandhi really left a mark on him, men who fought for their people's liberation. He was particularly captivated by the image of Ataturk in his military uniform. It sparked a desire to serve his country and contribute to its liberation. This ignited a passion in him to join the Royal Military Academy. But the academy at the time was a place for, the elite. Sadat came from very humble beginnings. And to be considered, he needed a pretty strong recommendation. His father reached out to an English doctor, Fitzpatrick, who had worked with him. Fitzpatrick agreed and provided that critical testimonial that opened the doors to the academy for Sadat. So now picture young Sadat stepping into the rigorous world of the academy. And it's here that he first crosses paths with the name that will forever be linked to his, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Though their initial interactions were brief, destiny had woven their paths together in ways neither of them could have possibly foreseen. Now, Sadat's time at the academy wasn't just about drills and discipline. It was a time for intellectual exploration and growth. He completely immersed himself in books, devouring knowledge, trying to understand the world around him. He even tried to join the British Institute in Egypt and pursued a degree from the University of London. All this while undergoing his military training. So this thirst for knowledge, it became a real defining characteristic of his leadership. It would shape his political decisions and his pursuit of peace later on. But along with his military training, Sadat's political awareness was also taking shape. His profound hatred for aggressors and admiration for liberators fueled his early activism. This is clear in his participation in demonstrations, calling for Egyptian independence, and his fascination with people like Gandhi, whose nonviolent resistance against British rule really resonated with him. And then there's his involvement with the Muslim Brotherhood, a crucial period that really showed his commitment to action, his belief in organized resistance as a means to challenge the status quo. He even surprised the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, Sheikh Hassan al-Banna, with his bold statement, "I am trying to set up a military organization to overthrow the existing regime." This wasn't just some youthful bravado. Sadat was serious about revolution. Al-Banna, initially taken aback, offered him 3 really crucial pieces of advice: self-reliance, intellectual development, and organizational security. These would become guiding principles for Sadat's revolutionary activities, which culminated in his first attempt to overthrow the British while he was stationed in Marsa Matruh. Even though it failed, it shows his courage, his willingness to risk everything for the liberation of Egypt. And during this time, he crossed paths again with Gamal Abdel Nasser. During a high-level army signals course in Ma'adi, they trained together in the midst of, escalating political tension. This shared experience would form the bedrock of their future alliance. But as we know, revolution comes at a price. Sadat's activities drew the attention of the authorities. He was arrested, imprisoned, stripped of his rank, isolated from the world. Just try to imagine him in cell 54 of Cairo Central Prison. It was in that harsh setting that he began a profound journey of self-discovery. He reflects on his first marriage, a traditional arrangement that hadn't brought him fulfillment. This conflict between his personal life and his evolving worldview caused him tremendous inner turmoil. Sadat's time in prison was a time of intense introspection, away from all distractions. He was forced to face his deepest fears, desires, and aspirations. And in the solitude of his cell, he discovered this profound inner strength, one rooted in his, simple peasant upbringing. And that's where he developed what he called a peasant mentality. This philosophy emphasized self-sufficiency, resilience, and a deeper connection to the land. It became a source of, unwavering resolve, guiding him through the hardships of prison and preparing him for the leadership role that awaited him. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Anwar el-Sadat. When we left off, Sadat was about to play a major role in shaping Egypt's destiny. So let's go back to 1952. Imagine the atmosphere as the free officers, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, take control. They overthrow the monarchy and bring in a whole new era for Egypt. Sadat vividly describes that night, the careful planning, the bold execution, the overwhelming joy as the revolution succeeded. He talks about his own role, negotiating with King Farouk, managing that transition of power, even announcing the revolution's success to the people. It was a moment of, immense pride for Sadat. Years of struggle had finally paid off. But the revolution, it wasn't just about getting rid of a regime. It was about creating a new path for Egypt, one free from outside influence and corruption. The Revolutionary Command Council, the group of officers now in charge, faced immediate problems. They had to handle pressure from, foreign powers like Britain. They wanted a curfew and guarantees about the monarchy. And within Egypt, they had to find this balance, dismantling the old ways but building a new system. These early days were full of tough decisions and internal power struggles. And now, let's talk about Sadat's relationship with Nasser. It was complicated. While they wanted the same thing, to liberate Egypt, they had very different ideas about leadership. Sadat, even as a key player in the revolution, was often in Nasser's shadow. He talks about times he was frustrated as Nasser solidified his power, making choices Sadat disagreed with. There's this one story where Nasser suggests a shift toward dictatorship, something that really shocked Sadat. He truly believed in democracy. This shows the tension between their views for Egypt, something that would shape their relationship for years to come. But Sadat, always the pragmatist, chose to deal with this by being patient, strategically withdrawing. He knew they had to stay united and focused on his roles. He served as Secretary General of the Islamic Congress and later Speaker of the National Assembly. He used these positions to speak up for Egypt, build relationships globally, and push for the revolution's ideals. During this time, he saw firsthand how tough it was to build a new Egypt. He describes the government's efforts, trying to change the economy, nationalizing businesses, starting huge projects like the Aswan High Dam, even implementing social reforms to fight poverty. But all these initiatives, they had their downsides. Sadat talks about the struggles, the economic ones, the bureaucracy, even people losing faith in the revolution's promises. On the world stage, he watched as Nasser's influence in the Arab world grew, and his relationship with the West, especially America, got worse. He talks about Nasser trying to form alliances with non-aligned countries, his part in the Bandung Conference and trying to stay neutral during the Cold War, but powerful forces pushed back. They wanted to undermine Nasser and Egypt's independence. And then there's the Suez Crisis of 1956. It's a defining moment. Sadat tells the story vividly. Nasser's choice to take control of the Suez Canal and the invasion that followed by Britain, France, and Israel. He described that feeling, that betrayal and anger that swept across Egypt, but also the determination to resist. Even though Egypt lost militarily, the Suez Crisis strengthened Nasser's position in the Arab world. Sadat, through it all, remained loyal and helped manage the fallout. But new challenges emerged after the Suez Crisis. Sadat saw the Soviet Union gaining influence as Nasser turned to them for help. This alliance, while it provided resources, also came with strings attached, which complicated things with the West even more. Sadat, always observing, started to worry about this dependence on the Soviets. He saw the danger in getting caught up in the Cold War. Then there's the story of the United Arab Republic. It was Nasser's big idea to merge Egypt and Syria. Sadat was elected Speaker of the Federal National Assembly, so he had a front row seat to this experiment. But the Union, it had problems, internal tensions, political maneuvering, and it eventually fell apart. Syria left in '61. Sadat describes the lead up to that breakup with disappointment and acceptance. He realized how complex Arab unity was, and that shared identity is tough when different interests are clashing. This period brought personal trials too. He had a heart attack. It made him face his own mortality. He writes about the strain of leadership, how tough it was, but also the inner strength he found in his faith and his dedication to Egypt. As the 60s went on, he got more and more concerned about what he called a mountain of hate in Egypt. He saw growing repression, freedoms being limited, the security apparatus getting more powerful under Nasser. He talks about arrests, censorship, people being silenced for speaking out. This really bothered Sadat. It went against his beliefs in democracy and his vision for a better Egypt. Even with all this, Sadat stuck by Nasser. He knew how hard leadership was, especially with so much pressure. He continued serving in the government, focusing on things where he could make a difference, things like cultural exchange and speaking up for Egypt globally. And then came the June 1967 war, a crushing defeat that really shook Egypt. Sadat describes the lead-up, the military mistakes, the loss of territory, and that feeling of humiliation. He talks about his efforts to rally the people, to keep their spirits up, and to find a way to move forward. The 67 war was a turning point for Sadat. It made him face the flaws in Nasser's leadership, the problems in the system. He started speaking more openly about his concerns, pushing for transparency, accountability, and moving away from the authoritarianism that had taken hold. This criticism, even though it faced pushback, would set the stage for Sadat's own rise to power and his vision for a new Egypt. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Anwar Sadat. We've gone through his early years, his involvement in the revolution, that complex relationship with Nasser, all the events that shaped Egypt in the 50s and 60s. Now we reach a turning point, Nasser's death in 1970 and Sadat unexpectedly becoming president. You know, a lot of people, both inside and outside Egypt, underestimated Sadat. They saw him as just a follower, someone who'd keep things as they were. But as we've seen, Sadat was a man of strong beliefs, strategic, and determined to make his own way. He was about to prove everyone wrong. He took over a nation struggling. Recovering from defeat, the economy was stagnant, the political system full of corruption. But there was something else too, the spirit of the Egyptian people, their resilience, their hope for a better future. Sadat understood that. He wanted to use that spirit, bring back hope, and guide Egypt to a fresh start. One of his first moves was to dismantle the power structures that had been stifling people under Nasser. He challenged the Soviet-backed group in the government. A risky move could have alienated a key ally. But he needed to assert his authority, set a new course for Egypt. He also started economic reforms, trying to revive the private sector, attract investment from abroad, tackle the problems that had been dragging the Egyptian economy down. These were tough choices, often unpopular. But Sadat knew sometimes you have to make hard decisions, accept short-term pain for long-term gain. Internationally, Sadat wanted to re-engage with the West, particularly America. He saw the need for a foreign policy that was more balanced, more practical. He felt Egypt's future was about building bridges, not burning them, about encouraging understanding instead of continuing conflict and isolation. This new direction in foreign policy, it was a big departure from Nasser's way. But Sadat was willing to take that risk. He believed Egypt needed to break free from those Cold War alliances and find its own place in the world. But Sadat's most audacious move was still ahead. He was set on getting back the Sinai Peninsula, lost to Israel in '67. It wasn't just about land, it was about Egypt's pride, its dignity, its rightful place in the region. So he planned carefully. He rebuilt the Egyptian military, formed alliances with other Arab nations, used diplomacy to outmaneuver his opponents. And then on October 6, 1973, he launched a surprise attack, crossing the Suez Canal. This shattered the idea that Israel couldn't be beaten, and it changed the whole Arab-Israeli conflict forever. Deciding to go to war, it was a gamble, a risk that could have gone terribly wrong. But he had faith in his military, in the justice of his cause, and in the support of the Egyptian people. And he was right. The October War, though it ended in a stalemate, it was a victory for Egypt in a psychological sense. It boosted their confidence, broke the image of Arab weakness, and opened the door for peace. The way Sadat led during the war, it was remarkable. He stayed calm even under intense pressure. He made strategic decisions that went against the usual thinking. And he inspired his people, never wavering in his belief in victory. His account of the war is gripping. You get his perspective on the complexities of military strategy, the cost of conflict in human lives, and the delicate balance between being determined and being pragmatic. But Sadat wasn't just a military leader, he was a statesman. He knew true victory didn't happen on the battlefield, it happened in the pursuit of peace. And he was ready to do what it took to achieve that, to break from the past, challenge the way things were, and offer peace to his enemy. So in 1977, he made a historic decision. He traveled to Jerusalem, the first Arab leader to do so. And he spoke to their parliament, the Knesset. It was bold, controversial. Some in the Arab world criticized him for it, but it was also incredibly courageous. It showed his commitment to peace no matter what. In his speech at the Knesset, it was a masterpiece of diplomacy. It was a plea for understanding, reconciliation, for a future where both sides respected each other. He talked about moving past the hatred and distrust that had divided Arabs and Israelis for so long, breaking down those psychological barriers. This trip to Jerusalem, it marked a turning point in the conflict. It led to the Camp David Accords, the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. A real sign of hope for a region that had been torn apart by conflict. But Sadat's search for peace, it came at a personal cost. He faced huge opposition from within the Arab world. He was isolated by many who were once his allies. And in the end, he paid the ultimate price, assassinated by extremists in 1981. But his legacy, it lives on. It shows us the power of vision, of courage, of truly believing in peace. Anwar Sadat's story, it's a reminder that even when things are incredibly difficult, one person can make a difference. His journey from that small village on the Nile to the world stage, it's inspiring. It shows what determination, resilience, and standing by your principles can achieve. And his legacy, it still inspires us today.
It challenges us to choose talking over fighting, to bridge the gaps between us, to keep working towards peace, just like he did, with courage and conviction. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Anwar Sadat's incredible life. We hope you found it moving, inspiring, and maybe even made you think about the world in new ways. And to all our listeners on the Number 7 podcast channel, thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. And let us know in the comments who else you'd like us to do a deep dive on. Until next time, thanks for listening.